Masochist, welcome back to another installment of r/no sleep. Today, I have one from N-Cubed02. Title: My friends and I found an abandoned oil rig. Part 2. Part 2? You know what that means. Don't watch this one first. Like always, I appreciate it if you like and subscribe. Let's get into it. As the doors to the lander sealed behind us, I sat down nervously on the pristine metal seat directly across the interior. The bulky box was robust, and although serviceable, its design far favored utility over comfort. We sat in the dark for only a brief second, and the overhead lights buzzed on. As they did, I turned to look over at Maria, who sat between Julian and I. Fearful tears ran down her face as she trembled. It hadn't taken much deliberation for us to decide we all should go down. The lander was clearly watertight, and if we got down to the bottom and decided that we weren't in a position to go on further, control panel mounted on the door guaranteed we had the option to return to the surface at any time. Mark had suggested that maybe only a couple of us descended into the depths, but Savannah had pointed out that splitting up in an unknown situation like this was a far worse idea. It's not like we had long to deliberate anyhow. The voice on the broadcast had told us we didn't have any time to lose. A rumble. I felt the taut cord holding us slack up for a moment, dropping us maybe a few centimeters before I felt us beginning to slowly lower. Maria let out a whimper, gripping Julian's arm as though she had never intended to let go. Mark only winced, while Savannah seemed to almost be enjoying herself. After a few seconds, the cold rattle surrounding us stopped, and I felt the metal wall I'd rest my back against slowly turn cold to the touch. We had descended below the surface. Not one spoke a word for the duration of the descent. The gravity of our situation wasn't lost on any of us. We had illegally trespassed on what was evidently some sort of hidden facility. If we had opted to ignore the voice, to choose not to try to help, then we either willingly let someone die to protect ourselves, or risked him surviving just to rat us out for being here, or worse. For the sake of our own skins and consciences, we had to do this, right? After several minutes, another jolt, and the submersible shuddered, groaning as it found a resting place. I felt the floor beneath me shift as the external locks docked our pod to some unseen structure below. Suddenly, a voice rang from the small PA speaker mounted in the corner of the room. It was grainy and warped, as before, but the words could still be made out. All right, perfect. I knew you guys would come. Your capsule's connected to the facility systems now, so I can wire in and guide you to me without having to depend on the radio transmitter. Here in a few minutes, the docking portal will finish its sealing process, and the portal will open into the middle of the floor in front of you. Careful, the ladder down will be slippery. Mark stood up out of his seat. Who are you? We're coming down to help if we can, but we need to know what we're getting into. What is this place? There was about 30 seconds of silence from the system before the voice hummed to life once more. I should mention, there's no microphones on your guys' end, so I can't hear a word you're saying. There'll be cameras throughout the facility so I can make sure you're heading in the right direction. I'm going to make a guess, however, and say you're probably wondering who I am. I'll be honest, I don't have a satisfying answer for you yet, but I promise to explain everything I can when you get here. Good luck. Julian stood up suddenly. Nope, no way we're going any further with this weird shit. I didn't sign up for this. None of us did. I don't trust whoever the hell is talking to us, and neither should any of you. He moved to press the button that would return us to the surface, but before he could, an aperture opened in the middle of the room, trickling water slowly into the hatch with a ladder. Julian rolled his eyes and pressed the button anyways. A buzzer beeped, and an automated voice rang out from the PA above. Warning, unable to return to surface at this time. Please detach from dock at sublevel 01. Surfacing will commence after depressurization process completes. Estimated time to depressurization, 28 hours. Savannah stood up out of her chair. Wait, 28 hours? It took us 5 minutes to get down here. What do you mean 28 hours? I winced. It's the pressure, I muttered. The deeper we go, the more time our bodies need to adjust before coming back up. I should have thought of this before. So what, we just wait? Savannah snapped. If we go up too fast, I swallowed, our blood starts to boil. Mark turned to me. That's a pretty big deal to just forget, man. If it's going to take a whole day and change just to come back up, that only leaves us with 10 hours to get to this guy, come back before the pilot swings back around. We definitely don't have enough food and water to last the extra week before his next try around. Maria stood up out of her seat and quickly walked over to the ladder to begin her descent. We all sat looking at her for a moment before she spoke. Well, if we only have 10 hours, we'd better hurry. Come on. We each made the descent into the chamber at the bottom of the ladder. I was the last one down, and as I reached the floor below our feet, I examined our surroundings. We seemed to be at the end of a circular hallway. At the end, a set of stairs descended about 5 feet where the platform sat, and the bulkhead door waited for us. Mark, Savannah, and Maria had already begun to walk down the hall. As Julian turned to follow them, I grabbed his shoulder with my hand. Hey, Jewel, we need to talk real quick. Now? We don't exactly have a lot of time. Make it quick. I let his shoulder go and he turned to face me, his expression full of annoyance. Look, I don't think any of us want to be down here. This was supposed to be a fun trip, and now we're actually in some real potential danger. Yeah, no shit, dude. I didn't know any of this was here. I'm in the same boat as you. I thought this was a normal rig like the one I was on. I know you do. That's why we brought you here, remember? You were only allowed to come because you were useful, because you were able to pull your weight. But we're not in your territory anymore, so you have a different job now. Oh yeah? What's that? Asshole? As long as we're down here, keeping Maria safe is your only priority. If shit hits the fan and I'm not able to protect her, I need you to swear with your life that you'll put her first. He softened. The anger on his face slowly washed away. Yeah, man. Of course. Same goes to you, though. Of course. I'm glad we have an understanding. We quickly caught up to the rest of the group, who had made their way down the stairs and had opened the bulkhead door separating us from the rest of the facility. As we passed through, the overhead lights buzzed softly, casting long, flickering shadows. The air smelled old, damp, metallic. Somewhere deeper in the structure, I could hear the low hum of machinery, the steady churn of something big operating beneath our feet. We stood at the bottom of the access stairs, just past the bulkhead door. The passage ahead waited eagerly for us. Mark turned in a slow circle, his flashlight sweeping over the walls. Okay, there's no way that generator up top is running all this. Julian frowned, listening. Yeah, no chance. Maria glanced between them. Wait, what do you mean? Julian exhaled, shifting his pack. I mean, what we got running last night should have been barely enough for emergency light and heat. That thing's been sitting for years. Mark crossed his arms. We figured it was a long shot that even if we got it on, we weren't sure how long it'd last. Offshore rigs usually run on diesel, which doesn't go bad the same way gas does, so we hoped there was a chance the reserves would last long enough for our trip. Thought we got lucky. He gestured vaguely at the hall ahead. This is way beyond that. Maria blinked. But then where's the power coming from? Savannah raised an eyebrow. I'm going to go out on a limb and say something down here. Julian exhaled through his nose, looking down the corridor. Has to be something bigger. Another power source. Something bigger. That phrase sat heavy in the air. Maria hesitated, then took a small step closer to me. So, is it bad? Nobody answered. Savannah grinned, sharp. Only one way to find out. She turned and kept walking. The rest of us hesitated, then followed. We walked for maybe 100 feet or so before a fork appeared in our path. The passageway opened into a larger chamber where 3 hallways split off in different directions. A rusted sign bolted to the wall labeled them. Sub-level maintenance, left. Primary research wing, right. Habitation and offices, straight. Where to, mystery man? Julian muttered, looking around for a speaker or intercom. As if in response, an intercom in the corner of the room sputtered to life. The words were harder to make out than before, distorted and echoing. Whatever he was saying, it sounded intense, as though his message was urgent. Savannah tilted her head. Do any of you understand what he's saying? I can't make it out. The garbled speech cut out intermittently, and we stood puzzled, waiting for clarity on our direction. Amidst the static and nonsense, my ear caught just one word. Right. You guys heard that too? Sounded like he said go right. Mark furrowed his brow and peered down the corridor leading to our right. Primary research, huh? Wonder if the poor bastard got stuck monitoring data. Maria lit up suddenly and pointed towards the floor leading to the research wing. Look, guys, footprints. Savannah pulled a flashlight out of her bag and illuminated the ground ahead. Indeed, tracks of briny water were faintly visible on the floor. They were difficult to make out in the dim light, but it appeared that whoever left them had been rushed, as several amorphous tracks weaved in and out of each other. As we traced the trail of the water out of the hall, the path curved around, ending abruptly against the wall next to the hallway entrance. Shit, looks like maybe he's been here recently. Julian shone his own flashlight, peering down each of the hallways. I sighed. All of his tracks seemed to be coming or going from research. Plus, he said, right? Yeah, I think so. So right we go. The research wing stretched out ahead, a dim, branching corridor lined with rusted pipes and corroded archways. The lights flickered more erratically than before, casting our warped shadows across the walls. The air was damp and stale, and something faint reeked the further we went in. We followed the water trail cautiously, our footsteps echoing against the steel floor. Somewhere behind the walls, machinery groaned and hummed, a constant torrent of noise that assaulted my ears and tightened our pace. Anyone else feel like we're walking into a damn haunted house? Julian muttered. Yeah, Mark said, except you're not actually in danger inside a haunted house. Savannah snorted. Tell that to the idiot in the clown mask who accidentally punched me last year. Maria said nothing, her eyes darting nervously between the bolted doors we passed. The research wing had the feel of something abandoned hastily. In the few open doors, we could see the chairs knocked over, papers scattered on the floor, monitors flickering, and displaying readouts I couldn't even begin to understand. A burst of static crackled through a nearby intercom, making all of us jump. The voice was still completely unintelligible, static, and the growing sound of rushing water still drowning out meaningful speech. But the emotion behind it was far stronger, more desperate than before. Panic. Do not. As it cut once more, we all exchanged glances. What is he trying to say? Maria whispered. No clue. Is he hurt? Mark asked. Savannah shook her head. I don't know. He sounds frantic, scared. I swallowed, my throat dry. He said something about right before, but now he's saying, do not, Julian finished. His voice was tight. Silence stretched between us, thick and suffocating. The air felt heavier now, pressing in on my skin, making it harder to breathe. Mark pointed ahead. Looks like the water tracks continue up ahead, into that big door. Let's at least check it out before we decide to turn back. I wasn't sure we even had the option to turn back at this point, so onwards we went. It took 3 of us to open the massive door at the end of the hallway. As we breached its threshold, we found ourselves in an enormous, cavernous room. It looked like a central hub for a research wing, a vast circular chamber with multiple exits leading off into different directions. The ceiling stretched at least 50 feet above us, lined with hanging cables and pipes. The walls were filled with observation decks, consoles, and what looked like vats filled with an inky blue ichor. The entire room had a sickly rotten smell to it. The odor caused me to cover my nose upon entry. Condensation dripped from the ceiling, and the entirety of the floor was slippery with water. By far, though, the most striking feature was the pit in the center of the room. Taking up almost the entirety of the floor, a gaping maw descended impossibly deep, only muted darkness visible further down. Its sides weren't plated steel, but solid, jagged rock. It dawned on me that this level of the facility must be mounted to the ocean floor. This cavernous hole bored directly into the seabed. The pit was surrounded entirely by robust guardrails, and snaking coils and wires rose from the darkness below, feeding into sensors and monitors all around the central rotunda. Hundreds of clearly pulsating tubes appeared to be siphoning the same blue liquid from the depths, slowly filling the vats in the room with the stuff. Mark whistled. Jesus. Maria inched closer to the pit's edge, peering down. How deep do you think it goes? Julian shook his head. No idea, but I don't like that we can't see the bottom. Whatever's down there absolutely stinks though. I moved toward the railing, gripping the cold metal and squinting into the void. There was something about the way the cables draped into the abyss, like fishing lines waiting to pull something up. I stood staring into the void, and out of the corner of my eye I saw Maria, Julian, and Mark step away. We'll check this side of the room, Mark called. See if there's anything useful in those offices. It made me nervous to split up, but they were only on the other side of the pit. Guess that leaves us, Savannah said, nudging my arm. Come on. I hesitated, my gaze lingering on the pit. A part of me wanted to walk away from it, to ignore the gnawing sense of unease clawing at my chest. As I let go of the rail and turned to follow Savannah, something caught my eye. A movement in the depths. At first, I thought my eyes were playing tricks on me. The darkness down there was thick, suffocating, shifting slightly like fog over still water. But as I stared, I realized there was something in it. Something moving. Something rising. A shape, massive and sinuous, uncoiled from the depths like a snake. My breath caught in my throat as it breached the surface. A colossal, inky black limb studded with glistening malformed sores and riddled with thick, pulsating tubes, sucking the blue substance from its mottled veins. A tentacle, writhing and frantic, and it was reaching for Maria. I opened my mouth to scream, but the noise barely escaped my throat. My body locked in place, frozen in horror as the thing lashed forward. She barely had time to react. As she started to turn, eyes wide, mouth parting, then the tentacle struck. It coiled around her torso, squeezing tight with an awful wet crunch before yanking her off her feet. The air escaped her body, warped her final scream, twisting into a lifeless groan. The sound echoed, sharp and raw, as she was dragged beneath the pit's edge. Julian lunged forward, grabbing her outstretched arm, but the force was too strong. His fingers slipped, and she was pulled into the abyss. There was only silence, and she was gone. I stumbled back, heart hammering. My pulse roared in my ears, drowning out the horrified shouts of the others. Savannah gripped my arm in a vice-like hold. Then, as suddenly as the tentacle had appeared, a blue flash filled the room, arising from the pit below. The whole chamber was flooded with it, a pulsing glow that lasted less than a second. It wasn't light, not exactly, more like a ripple in the air, a distortion that moved through the room. The air shimmered, thickening like a pressure wave before vanishing. The flash was the least of my focus, however, and I began to run, tears uncontrollably streaming down my face as I struggled to make haste towards where Julian and Mark were. You promised me you'd protect her. I'll kill you. I swear I'll kill you. I approached the other side of the pit, stopping to wipe my eyes between sobs. As I looked towards the two of them with clarity in my vision, they stood, gawking at me as though I was crazy. Between them, Maria was back, standing exactly where she had been a moment before. Dude, what the hell are you talking about? Calm down. I stumbled forward, gasping for air, my mind reeling. I had just seen her die. I had seen her dragged into the depths. I had heard the breath squeezed out of her lungs, but here she was, alive. Ellie? Maria frowned at me. What's wrong? I stared at her, chest heaving. You were... A deep, hollow sound rumbled from the pit, and I saw Julian's eyes widen. I whipped around just in time to see the tentacle rise again, exactly as before, but this time all of our eyes were locked onto it. Exactly as before, the limb writhed with malice before curling its slimy end and extending towards my sister. Before it could reach her, though, Julian braced himself, shoving her out of its path. As she fell to the side, the appendage recalculated, grabbing Julian instead. His strangled cry tore through the room as the thing yanked him off the ground, squeezing his chest with enough force I heard his ribs crunch under the pressure. His eyes bulged, locked onto mine as the tentacle ripped him away, disappearing like lightning into the dark. In the panic, I realized that Mark and Savannah had already taken off, attempting to run to the door and slipping in their step on the wetted floor. I stooped down, reaching to pick up Maria, who was dazed on the ground. She was soaked in the salty, slime-tinged water covering the floor. As I got her to her feet, the others had made it to the door and were holding it open, screaming for us to hurry up and make it through. Through Maria's wails, I managed to put her arm over my shoulder and helped her stumble towards the door. Mark and Savannah had crossed back into the hallway, and I shoved Maria through the doorway before I went through. As I rushed to close the door behind me, another blue flash shot through the room. I turned, just in time to see Julian standing in the exact spot as he had before, now alone. His expression one of sheer terror as the tentacle reached for him again. The door slammed shut between us, and the last thing I heard was his scream cut off with a blood-curdling snap. Mark held Savannah in his arms as she trembled, and Maria sat collapsed, inconsolable heap on the floor. We didn't have time to wait though. We could stop when we made it to safety. I pulled her up, and we began to run back through the hallway from which we'd came. It only took a few minutes before we reached the junction from earlier, and we let ourselves stop. Savannah hyperventilated as Mark ran his fingers through her hair, his eyes wide as he stared blankly into the research hall. Maria sat against the wall, choking with every breath as tears streamed between sobs. The intercom crackled to life, the words finally audible again.
No, 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 no! I told you not to go right! I told you not to go that way!
I drowned out the incessant noise from the speaker and collapsed with my back against the wall. I stared blankly at the trail of water which had led us to the research wing, the trail that curled towards the wall and ended in the spot where my sister now sat crying. Wow, awesome part 2. Very well done. We're dealing with something crazy down there. Can't wait to see what's next. I'll be running part 3 soon. Don't you worry. I appreciate each and every one of you. I am the Migrant Masochist. Farewell. We're dealing with something crazy down there.